Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we're looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking, one that's not afraid to give you the honest truth. My guest today is Dr. Samara Cardenas.
I'm so happy. Good morning that I'm here so we can talk about what really happens in medicine in
Yes,
California more than in other states.
yes, I was practicing in Oregon, went through, I believe, a very similar situation to yours. It's always an honor to talk to doctors who put ethics above all else. So many of our peers have just sort of I don't know what you call it, but they will follow rules at the expense of their patients. So it's an honor to have you on the show. I read that you went to medical school in the 1970s, so you were like a decade ahead of me. Did your residency at UCI, University of California, Irvine, correct?
Correct.
That was where my first son was born. And then you had an office there in Anaheim, California, and you sat on the board of Chalk. You've had a very important role in pediatrics in Southern California. What was your journey like? Were you always aware of the challenges that were in the field of pediatrics, or was that something that you came to understand as things happened? I'm just wondering what your journey was like.
I went into pediatrics because I like to help children, and I wanted to have a way of keeping them healthy and teach the parents what they needed to do to have healthy children. And so I did my career and I worked for a little bit for another doctor for 3 months. And I realized I wanted to be on my own. And so did I. And went solo, and I was solo until the day I closed my office last year.
Wow. You are a rare doctor, a rare pediatrician to be solo for how many years was that you were solo practice?
45 and a half.
Wow. Yeah, I think
Yep.
I was
Yeah.
35 and before they got me.
Yeah, well, they got me later. That's why
Yeah. So
I flew under the radars probably for a long time.
I guess so. And so back in the beginning, were you just kind of following American Academy of Pediatric standards when it came to, well, childcare, vaccines, anticipatory guidance, all of that kind of thing?
I'm sorry to say, but yes, I
Okay.
was.
Well, I was too in the beginning. That's what we were taught, right? That's what we knew.
That's what we knew.
Right. So on your journey to what we'll get to before we're done with this interview is, you ended up, I think it's losing your license over
No, I
refuse.
still have my
You
license.
still have your license. Okay. But they destroyed your practice because you
Correct.
refused to carry the COVID-19 shots.
Correct.
But leading up to that, had anything changed prior to COVID with regards to how you were handling the childhood vaccine schedule?
I looked at some of the newer vaccines, like the HPV, and there was a lot of information coming out about problems with it. You start reading, you start questioning, but I kept on being a good doctor according to AAP requirements, and I follow what I was told to follow.
So really it was the COVID situation that just was the last straw for you?
Correct. Yeah, COVID. When you start looking at the data that came out in 2021, there were 109 by the end of the year, 109,000 uh, reported not death, but a lot of injuries from the vaccine. Adults
Mhm.
and children. I cannot say it was just children. And they did nothing about it. They didn't show me that there was anything being done because of all of these vaccines doing something that was not the right thing to do. I remember when a vaccine, and it could be in the 80s, when rotavirus vaccine was introduced, and they had 4 problems with
Or
children,
deaths, I think it was. Yeah.
and they removed it completely. They took it off the market.
Yep.
And we have here in 1 year 109 adverse effects, 109,000
1,000.
adverse effects, and I they did nothing. So
Yeah.
that just made me realize something was very wrong.
Yep. Absolutely. Out of curiosity, the last few years of your practice, how large was your practice? How many babies were you getting, let's say, per month or per year?
Per month, I used to get, at the end, probably since COVID, maybe about 10.
Okay.
Before that, way at the beginning, it was kind of like 30 some a month. I
Wow.
was a very busy
You were
doctor.
that's that's an incredible number for solo practice. I mean, you truly were the only provider?
Well, there were others, but I was, I guess, the only good one. No,
Okay.
I had, there was an obstetrician who was Spanish speaking in Anaheim. He was a year ahead of me in medical school. So he said, if you come to Anaheim, all my newborns, as far as I can do, they'll be yours. And
Wow.
um, I went to Anaheim, I set up my practice, and it was very interesting because I did get him, and then the others, there was no other Spanish speaking pediatrician.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I became probably the busiest pediatrician in Anaheim for
Wow.
many years. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I did my first 2 years of residency in Fresno, which was largely Spanish-speaking migrant farm worker population, and my
Yes.
last year in San Diego, so I'm very familiar with the California system and everything that you experienced, but not to the volume that you had until I had a large practice of my own. You saw a lot of kids in your career. Then when COVID hit,
Yes.
you still had a pretty large practice from the sounds of things. You were still having all these babies. How
Yes.
did
Right.
children do with the SARS-CoV-2 virus? Did you see kids hospitalized? Did you see kids
No.
in trouble from the infection?
No, not at all. I will have a mom call and say, "My son tested positive." Okay, you want to come in or you want to stay home and treat him as a cold?
Yeah.
Give him honey. If they were older than 2 years, give him honey, put a little bit of garlic in it, and just treat it as if they were having a regular cold.
Mhm.
That was
Yeah.
it.
So I had the same experience. I had about 10,000 active patients when COVID hit. Um, I had had a larger practice also prior to them coming after me, but that's a different story. But out of 10,000 active patients, not a single child ended up in the hospital. So your experience and my experience were very similar, and it's what we've also been reading in the literature. Kids did just fine with the infection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then comes this so-called vaccine. Um, Tell me why you were hesitant to recommend that or carry it in your practice.
You just have to see all the data that was coming out that first year out of the VAERS reporting site. And it was kind of crazy. And then seeing that there were not really that many problems. It's like, why do I have to give them a vaccine when they're not sick? It's like if I will just, yeah, we're putting the band-aid before we have a cut. And it just didn't sound right to me. So I kind of try to tell the parents, don't do it. Don't give them the vaccines. It's okay. They'll do fine. And some of them listen. Some of them went to the pharmacies or whatever they were getting the vaccines. My counseling was, do not vaccinate, do not vaccinate. And I had nothing else to do with that because I didn't have anyone hospitalized because of it.
Right.
I kept hearing about adults, but not about children.
Yeah. And that's been the experience of everyone I've spoken to who takes care of kids. That infection was, I mean, when they first came out, we were all going to die from this thing. And so there was a lot of fear. They kept harping on the fear long after we realized, those of us working with kids like you and I, that this was a nothing illness basically for young kids.
Correct.
Their natural immune system had seen coronaviruses before and could
Yes.
stop this before it ever entered their body.
I still don't understand what was their reasoning for giving the vaccine to children.
Yep.
When you look at percentage of death, out of 2 million, the percentage of death was 0.0002,
Yeah.
which is about 2 children per 2 million.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
why? Why
Right.
vaccinate?
Right. Well, especially because the vaccine carries such high risk for harm.
Correct.
And this is,
Yes.
when we counsel our patients, and I imagine this weighed into your decision, we have to look at the risks and the benefits. And the benefits for this vaccine were basically negative. That's come out pretty clear
Correct.
that you were actually more likely to catch COVID if you took the vaccine. But the harms were through the roof, as you mentioned at the beginning of our talk.
Yes.
So you made the only logical and ethical decision not to carry that vaccine in your office. And what happened as a result of making that decision?
When I graduated in 1976, I remember do no harm. So that's what I always try to do all through my time as a pediatrician in my office. And when it was September 23, pandemic was called off in April 23. And then they changed the way the vaccine was not going to be provided by the federal government anymore. So it was going to come through in the VFC, Vaccine for Children program. And since 90% of my practice was Medicaid children, they gave it to us through VFC then. And we got a letter that said, you need to start ordering now the COVID vaccine. And I said, well, why? I'm not going to order the COVID vaccine. It's not needed.
Yeah.
And then when I decided I wasn't going to do it, we went to put a regular order for the other vaccines, and they refused to fill the order. So we got a letter saying, you haven't ordered COVID, you need to order COVID. Otherwise, you cannot order the others. And I said, so you are not letting me vaccinate the ones I might want to vaccinate? Why? I never got an answer. Just because it's AAP and ACIP and CDC and all of those organizations that are full of bureaucracy and
Yeah.
don't have the children's health at best.
To carry the story on to the next phase of what happened when you were denied all vaccines and your practice was, as you said, 90% of your population were individuals who were economically unable to get insurance through the standard companies. They had to get the vaccine program through the state. And so their only mechanism to be vaccinated or to even get your care was that you had to be in practice and you had to carry those vaccines to stay in practice.
Correct. But they were not giving them to me. So by the end of the year, I decided, well, if you're not giving them to me, why should I be part of this? So I sent a letter saying, if I cannot have the vaccines, I guess I won't be part of your group. And then I call and send letters to the main Medicaid groups that I had belonged to. And I explained, I don't have vaccines. I'm not going to vaccinate anymore. I just want to see patients that do not require vaccinations. And at the beginning, they said, okay. But then in about 6 months, in May, I got a letter. Oh my gosh, it's just about a year. Yeah, in the month of May, I got a letter saying by June, you're no longer a doctor in Chalk Health Alliance or in CalOptima, which was the main HMO group in Orange County for Medicaid patients.
Wow. So you basically got dropped from the insurance product. And, patients on Medicaid, there is no way they can afford to private pay for
No.
vaccines or to private pay even for, just regular care. It's
Right.
gotten so expensive. I mean, these are individuals who are struggling to put food on the table,
Yeah,
which,
that's their main concern is what do we eat today?
right, which I have to thank you for your service to that underserved population. I know because I ran a large clinic that when you take Medicaid, in Oregon, it was called Care Oregon, you basically are taking about half or less of the typical reimbursement. And pediatric overhead runs anywhere from 70 to 80% generally. So you lose
Yes.
money every time you take patients like this, and you had 90% of your practice.
Yeah.
So you didn't get wealthy being a pediatrician. You were definitely serving mankind.
And I was. That's why I went into medicine. I get a little emotional. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. It's real easy realizing that, well, you could have just have the vaccine and keep on going. But that was against what I felt that I needed to do. If I had that COVID in my office, and for some reason I was out of the office, and my staff would be asked by a parent, "Oh, I want the COVID too. How about if they will just," which would have been wrong, but by accident they gave the COVID vaccine. I said, "No, I cannot take a risk of doing
Mm,
harm to a patient of mine."
yeah.
So
God
that
bless
just
you.
totally took me off any kind of Medicaid population in my office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness, what have your patients done? I mean, as you said at the beginning of our interview, there was nowhere else for these people to go. What
You
what
know,
what happened to all these patients?
they just put them in other
Mm,
doctors' offices,
mm,
because since the group CalOptima is run as an HMO, by being run as an HMO, they own the patients, so they can do
mm.
whatever they want. But what I found as time went by over the last part of the year, a lot of these patients had no idea that they had fired me.
Wow.
So they were calling me, can we set up an appointment? And I said, I can't unless you want to pay me cash. And
Right.
I thought at the beginning that it was possible, but it wasn't enough to
No.
keep the office going.
I'm sure you were struggling to cover the overhead as it was, and then to lose 90% of your patients, or maybe just 80%, maybe 10% could somehow figure a way to pay, but that you can't survive like that.
No,
So did your office close?
yes. What happened was at the end of September, September is my birthday, so I guess a lot of things happen in September. I was having dinner with one of my sons, and he asked me, "How is the office doing on this cash only thing?" And I said, "Well, I've been having to get money out to pay for the office." He says, "Well, think about it, Mom, because you're not younger anymore.
Yeah.
You're not young anymore. Maybe it's time to look at other avenues instead of using your retirement money."
Mhm.
And the next day I slept on it. And the next day I texted him and I said, "I'm closing the office October 31st."
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to undo an office of 45 plus years in a
Tell me
month.
about it. I went through the same process. I wasn't 45 years in my office, but I was 14, and at one point I was hiring, almost 40 employees. So it was a big
Yeah,
operation.
that was a big office. By the end, I had only two left. two employees left, and my office manager left me in June. And she had been with me for 38 years,
Oh
and
my
she
goodness.
just gave me a 2-week notice while I was in a little vacation with two of my grandchildren. So slowly they realized that the office was not making money,
Yeah.
and it's time to call it quits. I think they saw it before I did.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, I can do it. I can do it. I did it when, back in 79. I can do it again. But you can't.
God bless you. You made the right choice. Given all the circumstances, I don't see that you had any other options. Your son was spot on. Probably saved you from using your entire retirement fund trying to rescue a practice that
That was
was
dead.
taken away from you. I mean, it wasn't of any fault of your own. All you were doing was being an ethical doctor.
My colleagues are not ethical. They all have the COVID vaccine.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like so wrong. But they said, but we can't just go through like you. I said, yes, you can. You look for other avenues, or you cut down your expenses in your life.
Really tough out there for our peers, but more and more of us, we've got to stand up. One of the reasons I wanted to interview you is because you made those tough decisions, and we need more pediatricians to do this. We need to all stand up and start speaking out for what's really going on. And we can't remain silent anymore. Unfortunately, as you know, the COVID shot is still on the childhood immunization schedule recommended by the CDC. And
Right.
that's what drives the insurance companies to use this weapon against us, all the quality measures and the reimbursements and penalties if you don't do it. Like, you experience the ultimate penalty. You lose all your clients.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is because it's on the ACIP group, and they keep saying it needs to be because population is too. How did she say it? One of the ladies on the ACIP, doctor something, I can't remember her name. She said that they couldn't have it in a different way because the public was too stupid to understand it. I mean, she might have not used the word stupid,
Yeah.
but
I
me
remember
being
reading about that.
I use it.
They don't think that the public has the capability of figuring out whether or not they need the vaccine. Therefore, we're going to recommend it for everyone, when really, if it should be recommended at all, which I don't think it should, nobody should get that vaccine, in my opinion. I don't give medical advice. I'm no longer licensed, but it's all harm and no benefit. But they were floating the idea of, well, we could reserve that vaccine for high risk individuals.
Correct.
And what you're referring to is somebody saying, well, but the public wouldn't be able to figure out who's high risk and who isn't. So they decided to leave it on the schedule 6 months and beyond for everybody.
Yeah, they're supposed to have a vote in June, but I doubt if they're going to pass it because that takes a lot of effort, and you have to do something different, and you might lose whatever kickbacks they might be getting from. And I shouldn't say that, I have no data for that, but we all know that things get passed when there's money behind it.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's conflicts of interest. It feels like to me, as happened for my practice, that the system or somebody weaponized the Vaccines for Children's program to target you and your practice because you weren't in line with what they wanted.
Exactly right. That's a very good way to put it. Yeah.
And in reality, this is a massive discrimination against the poor. The population that you largely served, which was a real gift and work of the heart and soul that you provided these families who had nowhere else to go to get the kind of care they were getting from you. So I just thank you so much for all your hard work and your sacrifice. I'd like to have you back on for another show, and I want to talk about the CDC, sort of the inner workings as you've witnessed it, and then also I know you have a lawsuit, which sometimes that's the only way to get people's attention. So I do want to have you back on for that. But in closing this show, as a an amazing pediatrician of 45 years in solo or private practice, our viewers sometimes need to be left with a message of hope. Do you have such a message that you can share with our audience?
Yes, I do. And it's interesting that Bobby Kennedy stole what I was going to say. He said it the other day. Parents have to think about and analyze the vaccines before they say yes to the pediatrician. He said it in another way, but I think parents are the ultimate persons to take care of their own children. So they should question, they should not just agree with everything the doctor in front of them is telling them, because we need to make our conscious and the right decision for our children. If you think you should vaccinate all of the vaccines, do it, but make sure you understand the risks about doing things that might be harmful. So watch your children and always question everything that is being given to your child, uh, at the doctor's office, in school, everywhere, because they're actually your responsibility, and also they are the future of the world. We need them healthy and capable of taking care of the world in about 30 years. So yes, just question everything and do the right thing for your children.
Yeah. I I got a sense just reading between the lines, because you mentioned schools and that your understanding of vaccines in general has perhaps shifted a little bit, and you think parents should question all vaccines and look into the risks and the benefits of all vaccines, not just COVID.
Absolutely. It used to be COVID got me into this journey, and as you get into a certain journey, and this was a very painful one, I started questioning all the other vaccines. And when you look at the VAERS data, it, I, s- I spend now 2 or 3 days looking at the data so I could. It's incredible. It's incredible. The DPT has problems. The HPV has so many
Big
problems.
problems.
Uh, the I thought the DPT will be a very simple vaccine. It's bacterial. It's not mRNA. But no, there's a lot of problems with it. So you have to question and realize, even if you're in California, I've known some of the Christian churches are having little schools for non-vaccinated children, and I
Mhm.
think that might be the way to go unless we can get the vaccines off the schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. Nothing medical procedure wise should be mandated. You should, as a parent, have the right to decide whether or not you want to have a surgery procedure or a vaccine procedure. This is nothing that should ever have been mandated. You're in California, which is one of the toughest states. There's only a handful of them where they removed philosophical, they removed religious exemptions, and medical exemptions are pretty much non-existent because all the doctors who are writing medical exemptions either lost their licenses or were highly restricted, so they can't write medical exemptions.
uh,
So you mentioned a creative way. Some call it enrichment programs, or it's school-like, because they can't be schools because schools are required to vaccinate to
in
attend.
California.
Right, in California. But if you live in one of those states that does not have anything but medical exemptions, find your tribe, right? Find those fellow
Find
parents.
your tribe. That's
Yeah,
yes,
whether they're
absolutely.
in churches or otherwise, and you set up educational programs, enrichment programs, if you will, and you can still educate your children probably in a better way than the public schools anyway.
Absolutely. I have been able to write. Last year, I wrote 5 medical exemptions, and 2 of them were sent back and not approved because the parent did not have enough data from prior doctors. So they're so strict
Yes.
that the word of a parent is not enough. You have to have documentation from a physician. And when a doctor does more than 5 per year, you might end up totally losing your license.
Yep. So
Um,
you're aware of that danger.
oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
was actually told by one of the patients that I did the exemption for, and she does some of the lobbying in the legislature in Sacramento to try to get the vaccines from being the way they are done in California. And she used to belong to Free Now Foundation. She's got now a different foundation. But when I did that for her daughter, she told me, she said, if you do more than 5, you might lose your license. So I said, oh,
Wow.
I guess I won't do more than 5.
Yeah, which, if you think about it, there's probably thousands, not probably, I know there are thousands and thousands in California, families that need exemptions, want exemptions, they can't find them. If you have any last words, go for it. Otherwise, I'm going to make sure I get you back on for another episode.
All right. No, I don't have any more words. I can talk all day about it, but there's always a fine amount of money, so it's okay. We'll see you again
All
very
right.
soon.
Thank you so much for being on our show. Well, folks, thanks for watching. I'm Dr. Paul, your host. You can coach with me at kidsfirstforever.com. And if you want to get the real informed consent about all childhood vaccines and, in fact, adult vaccines, my latest book, Vax Facts, has it all. And it is what you need to really understand the true risks and benefits. VaxFactsBook.com, where you can order authors' copies that are signed and personalized by myself and my co-author, Dee Dee Hoover, or you can get this book anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Okay. Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Jan Thomas.
This is about your mom.
It is.
All right. Tell us what happened.
Well, after my dad had passed away in 2017, we, took my mom to assisted living places to live. She'd had a couple strokes, got through them like a tramp. She could still talk, but she did have problems walking, so she was in a wheelchair. We put her in 3 different nursing homes. We were trying to find a good place for her. The second place we put her in, this COVID started, and it was not a great place for her to be. So we moved her to another one where my youngest sister decided to work there so she could be with her during COVID, so she could keep an eye on her and no family was there. And then COVID broke out. My mom got the first 2 vaccinations, didn't seem to bother her at that time. And then the booster came out. On Halloween night, they had allowed some kids to come in and get candy handed out to them by the elderly. The next day, they gave her the booster. 2 days later, my mom stopped eating. Mom just about quits functioning. She was feeling very strange. She told my sister, I feel like I need to crawl out of my body. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. And she just watched her slowly not getting up, not talking to anybody. She couldn't talk. Her teeth, her dentures kept falling out. She was losing weight at a rapid rate, And she said, am I dying? I said, well, Mom, you're not eating. And she said, well, I always told you that if I'm not eating, you got to call 911. So anyway, we sat and watched her go. And my sister and I knew it was the vaccination because 3 other people in that facility got the booster the same time mine did. All 4 together passed away within 2 months of getting that booster. And the other people were walking, taking their showers, feeding themselves, and they just went downhill from there. But of course, they wouldn't allow any assisted living people to talk about anything, the employees there. That was tragic. People were dying alone. We were lucky because Lori worked there and we got to be with my mom when she died. We were very lucky. So I know it was the booster. You know, it was. There's just no way it couldn't have been, especially with the other people. But it's just, and I just can't believe people would do this. You know, you watch your mom die, and she's going to die dying, and then one day she just can't talk anymore. I mean, she completely lost her voice. My mom was a great person. She didn't deserve to. Nobody deserves to die like that. But she couldn't figure out what was going on with her body. She kept saying that something's wrong. Something's wrong. And it was right after that booster shot. So anyway, that's the story of that one.
Awful. I'm sorry.
You know, I know everybody looking at this bus and everything. It just reminds me what a criminal thing that was done to everybody. And I think they intentionally, my own personal opinion, things that I've of course researched or heard, elderly was a big hit. You know, look, we can take them off Medicare, we can take them off Social Security. They'd have too much knowledge of history. You know, there's a whole gambit of why they go after the elderly. You know, it costs too much money or something. I don't know. That's my own personal opinion, but I don't know. That was my story on that.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
So I don't know how much proof people need. I don't know how much, you know, what's going on in this, because I was watching a lot. I watch a lot of YouTube and independent places where people in the nursing homes were, the employees said, we're not supposed to talk about this. We're not supposed to talk about it. Some of them had the same exact symptoms as my mom. All of a sudden they weren't eating, they weren't talking, they couldn't function after these shots. You know, so I knew that was my sister Lori, and I know that. Anyway.
Now you want to speak about your grandson?
I do.
Tell us about him.
My grandson is 24 now, and he's when he was 2 years old, he got his MMR vaccination, and the next day he was nonverbal. He just got into just watching wheels roll, and you know, blank eyes, and he started getting extremely violent as he got older. We didn't know what this was at that time. You know, that was 24 years ago. Not really recognizing those were signs of autism, and he would be violent. He'd go after people, just out of the blue, and try to get him into schools. They wanted him on heavy-duty medications and put him in a single room. Well, thank God for my daughter. She started finding out, and then she finally got a decent diagnosis for him, but they put him on these medications. When he was 9 years old, he tried to hang himself. He was on psychotropic drugs that adults get for mental illness. He was on those. And of course, they cause thoughts of suicide. But he was 9 years old, and he threw a rope over this thing in their house, and she said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to hang myself." You know, and no emotion. So she took him all off of the drugs, started teaching him how to work within the world. She got him in special education programs, and he's a high-functioning Asperger's, very high-functioning now. But he was trying to kill himself.
Awful.
And I'm watching grand nieces and nephews that are getting the vaccinations. How does a child that never goes to daycare get hoof and mouth disease? That's what they're calling it. He's not even 2 years old yet. He's got things all over him, spots and everything else. He's been sick about every single month since he's been born. And then another one of my other siblings' grandchild, autistic, and both these mothers were vaccinated while they were pregnant, the COVID vaccine, because they believed in it. And there's signs of that. And
so they took the COVID vaccine, shot when they were pregnant,
mm-hmm.
and you think that affected the?
Oh, and plus they vaccinated the kids with the regular. Yeah, they did both. Yeah, they did both, and you couldn't convince them. That this is.
So is that in your family that some understand, some don't? Going back to your mother's death, you probably had, I'm assuming, some that believed it was a shot and some that didn't. Oh
yeah, well, Lori and I were kind of the outcasts of the family. We don't.
So how many children?
Well, there's five. There's 5 adult children in my family.
And 2 understand and 3 don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking to him about this stuff is because I don't have a degree. but I have common sense and some wisdom behind stuff. That's brought up to me constantly. You don't have the educational background. You know, I guess life experiences and common sense don't make sense, you know. So that's thrown in Lori's nice face all the time. But yet we're not the sick ones. We aren't, you know, we aren't. Did
you get COVID, whatever that is?
You know, the only thing I did get is I had a loss of taste and smell for about 5 days. I thought that was odd because that's the only thing I got. And I never, of course I didn't get tested. One of my other relatives said, well, you should have gotten tested. I said, for what?
Well, no one's sticking things up their noses. No,
No, I mean, I was just so against it. But yeah, that's probably the only thing I got. No, I'm pretty healthy. In fact, I got a little sick in March, just as recently, March for about 4 or 5 days from a cold that I used licorice root tea, I used all the natural products and everything else, and it was gone. So I'm into natural health. You know, I'm 69 years old and on 0 medications.
Nice.
Yeah, and I did that because food's your medicine. I learned that a long time ago through a naturopath I was going to with some issues I had with gluten. And yeah, I don't believe in any of this crap. We're our own doctors.
That's correct. Well, we're really sorry about your mom, and we do want to put a picture up here in our memorial.
I have it. I just have it on my phone.
Yeah, so we'll get that organised for you. But I want to thank you for.
Well, I'm sorry if it wasn't very much. I didn't
you
have
were
it.
great.
Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
pledged to find out what is driving the country's rise in autism.
Compiling medical records from a number of databases. He'll direct resources to study environmental factors, exposures, and external factors.
Scientific progress on this has been slow because scientists are frankly scared to ask the question.
Genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin, and we're going to look at all the potential culprits.
With no a priori thumb on the scale, you can't look at that.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to the Secretary for finally saying from an important public platform that this is an epidemic and we need to find the causes and we need to stop it.
Other issues CHC has been pushing for years are finally gaining mainstream traction.
Today we're announcing we are removing industry members, pharma members from FDA advisory committees.
We're seeing reports that you're considering removing the COVID vaccine as a mandatory shot for children.
The recommendation for children was always dubious. The vaccine itself does have profound risk of myocarditis, pericarditis, even strokes.
Very, 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 very few people are still taking these things. In that sense, the mRNA vaccines for COVID in the marketplace are effectively dead.
We are working together to change the federal fluoride recommendations, and we're looking at the science now. There's a direct inverse correlation between fluoride exposure and low IQ in children.
Health officials announced plans to phase out 8 artificial dyes from our food supply.
The FDA is effectively removing all petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply.
We don't have a surveillance system that actually works, and that is a crime. And we will do that right away. And I understand the perverse incentives that need to be changed right away.
When there's a political will to answer a question like this, it will happen.
We're going to change things for real this time.